Hello students, welcome back to our revision with MCQ series, and today we are going to start with science and technology. So the same format, we'll discuss 10 questions and in the end we'll have a practice question for your practice, and this is going to help you revise the science and technology section for your prelims examination very efficiently. So let's start with the first question. Consider the following statements about bacteriophages. 1. They are viruses that infect and kill bacteria by injecting their genetic material into bacterial cells. 2. They can infect and replicate within human cells and directly cause diseases in humans. Which of the statements given above is or are correct? A. 1 only, B. 2 only, C. both 1 and 2, and D. neither 1 nor 2. You please take 10 seconds and attempt this question and then we'll discuss the answer. Done? Alright, so here we are talking about bacteriophages. Bacteriophages are tiny viruses that infect bacteria. Bacteriophages are tiny viruses that infect bacteria. In fact, the term bacteriophage is derived from a Greek word wherein phagus means to eat. So bacteriophages are also known as bacteria eaters. So what do? They attach themselves to the bacterium. There they inject the genetic material inside the bacterium. They replicate within the bacterium and then they cause the bacteria to die. So this is the process that a bacteriophage follows. And the important thing over here is that bacteriophages do not target humans. They only target bacteria. As the name, they only target bacteria. They do not target humans. They do not directly attack humans. They do not target humans or cause any harm in the human body. They just attack the bacteria and cause the bacteria to die. So this is the mechanism of a bacteriophage, and these are very abundant. In fact, they are one of the most abundant biogenetic components that are present on Earth. So they are very abundant. But the thing over here is that they do not directly attack humans. This is something that we need to understand. So if we look at the statements again, they are viruses that infect and kill bacteria by injecting their genetic material into bacterial cells. Correct? They can infect and replicate within human cells and directly cause diseases in humans. Incorrect. So the correct answer will be option A. And you can look at this explanation. Please take a screenshot. So these bacteriophages, they mainly occur in 3 forms if we talk of the structure of them. So they are icosahedral. Icosahedral meaning they have some 20 different triangles combined together. Mostly they look like a sphere. So it's icosahedral, head with a tail. Then there is one without a tail, and then there is one in a filamentous form, like in a thread-like structure. So the structure is also different and they are found most abundantly on Earth, and they do not target humans directly. Alright, moving on to the next question. Consider the following statements about India's indigenous TNPB based genome editing tool. 1. It uses CRISPR-Cas9, Cas12a and enables precise DNA editing in plants. 2. It allows easier delivery of TNPB into plant cells, reducing dependence on complex tissue culture methods. Which of the statements given above is or are correct? A. 1 only, B. 2 only, C. both 1 and 2, or D. neither 1 nor 2. Please attempt this question. Done? So here we are talking about India's indigenous TNPB based genome editing tool. So this has been developed indigenously in India, and it does not use CRISPR-Cas9 or Cas12a because it is indigenous. These are not indigenous. It does not use this editing tool. What basically happens over here? Now, what do you understand by this entire gene editing tool? Gene editing tool simply means that it is going to edit the genome. It is going to edit the DNA sequence. These are like tiny scissors. They are proteins, but these proteins act like tiny scissors, which are going to make cuts in the genetic material wherever needed, and then modifications can be done. So these are gene editing tools. So this indigenous one does not use Cas9 or Cas12a. It instead uses TNPB. It uses TNPB, which is a protein. Indigenously developed, it makes cuts wherever required in the DNA sequence, and then modifications can be done. So if we look at the statements again over here, it uses CRISPR-Cas9, Cas12a? No. It allows easier delivery of TNPB into plant cells, reducing dependence on complex tissue culture methods. Yes. Why does it allow easier delivery? Because it is smaller. It is smaller in comparison to CRISPR-Cas9 or Cas12a. This TNPB genome editing material is actually smaller. It is less complex, it is smaller, so it allows easier delivery of this protein into plant cells, and this reduces dependence on complex tissue culture methods. So the correct answer would be answer B. So this has been developed at CRRI, Cuttack, and this is an indigenous development. It uses TNPB, which is a transposon associated protein, and this acts as a miniature molecular scissor, enabling precise DNA cutting and editing in plants. So please go ahead and take the screenshot. Now, additionally, something else has also been developed indigenously, that is BIRSA 101. BIRSA 101, which is our first indigenous CRISPR-based gene therapy for sickle cell disease. So this is something that also we need to keep in mind. Now let's move on to the third question. Epigenetics refers to the study of A. Permanent alterations in DNA sequence affecting genetic information. B. Modulation of gene expression without alteration in DNA sequence. C. Inheritance of traits through meiotic and mitotic cellular processes. D. Artificial alteration of genes using laboratory biotechnology tools. Please attempt this question. Okay, so epigenetics refers to the modulation of gene expression without alteration in DNA sequence. So in epigenetics, we do not actually alter the DNA sequence, but gene expression changes. So epigenetics is the study of environmental factors and individual behavior that actually decide the gene expression without altering the DNA sequence. Now think of it in the case of identical twins. Let's say there are two identical twins. They are going to have the same DNA sequence, but one of them might have diabetes and one of them might not have diabetes. This is based on the environmental factors, the lifestyle, the individual behavior that each of the twin is going to follow. So this is reversible because DNA sequence is not being changed. It's more like a gene on and off therapy, wherein we are deciding which gene can be turned off and which gene can be turned on, which characteristic is going to be passed, which characteristic is not going to be passed. So which of the identical twin is actually going to inherit diabetes and which of them is not going to inherit diabetes. So it all is decided based on the lifestyle and the individual behavior patterns that the people follow. So this falls under epigenetics. And because we are not making changes in the DNA sequence, this is reversible. This is reversible. Unlike mutation, where we are actually making modifications to the actual DNA sequence, epigenetics is reversible, right? So let's look at the explanation. It is the study of how environmental factors and individual behaviors influence the way genes function. Unlike genetic mutations, epigenetic changes are reversible and they do not alter DNA-based sequence. Instead, they affect what? How the genetic information is read and expressed by the body. So please take a screenshot. All right, moving on to the next question. Consider the following statements about mRNA vaccines. 1. mRNA vaccines introduce genetic material into the nucleus of human cells, where it integrates with DNA to enable long-term immunity. 2. The mRNA used in vaccines serves as a template for cells to produce a specific viral protein. 3. Antibodies generated in response to mRNA vaccines can persist in the body and enable a faster immune response upon subsequent exposure to the same pathogen. Which of the statements given above is or are correct? A. 2 only, B. 2 and 3 only, C. 1 and 2 only, or D. 1, 2 and 3. Please attempt this question. Done? Alright, so here we are talking about mRNA vaccines. mRNA. What is mRNA? Messenger RNA. mRNA vaccines. So how in general vaccines are going to function? They are going to introduce a small quantity of pathogens so that our immunity, so that the antibodies can be prepared in our body, and in turn our immunity can be boosted for the next time when this foreign material or this pathogen enters our body, right? So this mRNA vaccine is going to inject what? It is going to inject mRNA to make a small quantity of the virus. But we need to understand that this injection is not happening inside the nucleus. It is not happening inside the nucleus or inside or near the DNA of the cell. It is not happening inside the nucleus. It is happening outside the nucleus. Outside, this small quantity of virus is being generated, and then in response our body is going to produce what? Antibodies, and then over a period of time the small virus is going to die. But for the next time when this virus is going to enter our body again, the body is going to remember and it will trigger the response. It will trigger the production of these antibodies, and in turn our immunity will be boosted and we'll be able to tackle with the disease, right? So this is what happens. So the correct answer here would be B. 2 and 3 only. The mRNA vaccines introduce genetic material into the nucleus of human cells. No, this is incorrect and the other two are correct. So please take a screenshot. Alright, moving on to the next question. Consider the following statements about RAM Air Turbine. 1. It is activated during emergencies to power critical flight systems when primary electrical or hydraulic sources fail. 2. It generates electrical power independently of aircraft speed. Which of the statements given above is or are correct? A. 1 only, B. 2 only, C. Both 1 and 2, or D. Neither 1 nor 2. Please attempt this question. Done? So here we are talking about a turbine, RAM Air Turbine. So this turbine is actually used in cases of emergencies. It is a small turbine, but it is a wind-driven turbine. So this is either activated automatically or manually at times when there is a complete engine failure in cases of emergency, and it is wind driven. It is actually its speed of the turbine is going to be decided by the speed of the aircraft. Faster the aircraft is moving, faster this turbine is going to move, and this turbine is in turn going to generate energy. It is going to generate electricity. It is going to generate power because it is going to be connected by the hydraulics, by the different hydraulic engines, etc. So this is what's going to happen. It is going to function only in emergencies, and it is driven by the speed of the aircraft. It is actually wind driven. It is not independent of the aircraft's speed. So if we look at the correct answer over here, it is only option A. It is a small turbine installed in aircraft to act as an alternate or emergency source of hydraulic or electrical power. So it happens during an emergency situation such as a complete loss of primary electrical generation or hydraulic systems. And this generates power by extracting energy from the airstream created by the aircraft's motion. And therefore its power output depends on the speed of the aircraft. And this spinning RAT turns a generator or a hydraulic pump. This creates enough electricity or hydraulic pressure to keep the most important systems running, including flight controls, basic instruments, radio and communication. So it is majorly dependent on the speed of the aircraft. Faster the aircraft is moving, faster the turbine is going to move, and faster this power is going to be generated to keep the basic systems in the aircraft alive. Please take a screenshot. Alright, moving on to the next question. Consider the following statements comparing in-flight and Wi-Fi connectivity technologies. 1. Unlike air-to-ground systems, satellite-based in-flight connectivity can provide internet access over oceans and remote regions due to aircraft-mounted satellite antennas. 2. Compared to satellite-based system, air-to-ground connectivity is less dependent on ground infrastructure and remains unaffected by aircraft altitude. Which of the statements given above is or are correct? A, 1 only, B, 2 only, C, both 1 and 2, and D, neither 1 nor 2. So here we are focusing, or we are asking about the internet connectivity inside an aircraft, the different ways in which we are providing internet. So please attempt this question. Done? So we're talking about internet on airplanes. So here we have two technologies. One is satellite based. One is satellite based and the other is ground tower based. It is ground tower based. Now in the satellite based internet connectivity, we are relying on satellites, which means that the signals are going to move from the ground to satellite and then finally the aircraft. Signal is going to move from ground to satellite and then the aircraft by the antenna that is going to be placed on top. This is how satellite based internet connectivity is going to work. Now because it is not dependent on any ground towers, it can work in remote areas also, because we do not need any towers to be constructed. We are relying only on satellites. So it can work in remote areas, it can work in oceans, forest and difficult topography, etc. It does not depend on ground towers. It works everywhere. Okay. And in contrast, we have the ground tower based connectivity, ground tower based internet connectivity. As the name suggests, we are going to rely on ground towers. So the signal is going to be transferred from ground towers to the aircrafts, and here the antenna is going to be placed as the bottom of the aircraft, at the belly part of the aircraft. So this cannot work everywhere. It cannot work in rough terrain, in difficult terrain. It cannot work everywhere, but satellite based can work everywhere, right? So the correct answer here would be option A, which is only 1. Unlike air-to-ground system, satellite-based in-flight connectivity can provide internet access over oceans, remote regions. Correct? Compared to satellite-based system, the air-to-ground connectivity is less dependent on ground infrastructure and remains unaffected by aircraft altitude. Incorrect, because it is dependent on ground infrastructure. So please take a screenshot of this. Alright, moving on to the next question. Consider the following statements about Narco analysis test. 1. Sodium pentothal is administered to induce a sedated state that reduces the subject's capacity to fabricate information. 2. The results of narco analysis tests are not considered confessions, since those in a drug-induced state cannot exercise their choice in answering questions. Which of the statements given above is or are correct? A, 1 only, B, 2 only, C, both 1 and 2, or D, neither 1 nor 2. Please attempt this question. Done? So here we are talking about the narco analysis test. So in narco analysis test, basically a person is given a drug. This drug is an anesthetic and the drug is sodium pentothal. Now, what happens when this drug is administered into the person's body? The person goes into a deep state of relaxation, in a sleepy state, and there they find it difficult to manipulate their answers. They're most likely to say yes because they're not going to fabricate stories. They're in a very relaxed state, in a very deep sleep state of mind. So this is an anesthetic that is administered into the body of a person. But the Supreme Court, in a very important case of 2010, that was Telvi versus the state of Karnataka. The Supreme Court made it clear that in order to conduct a narco test, you need to get the consent of the patient. And whatever confessions are being made in such a state, they will not be treated as confessions because the person in this case is not able to use their mind to the optimum capacity. They are in a very deep sleep state of mind and they're not making complete use of their of their intellect at that time, and that's why it is not going to be treated as a confession if you are not taking consent. However, if you are taking consent, then whatever statements are being made, they can be treated as evidences, not confessions but evidences, because after giving consent, whatever statements are being made, they can still be treated as evidences, but you need to have the consent of the patient. So the correct answer over here would be option C. Option C, both 1 and 2. Please take a screenshot. Done? So in the landmark judgment in Selvi and others versus State of Karnataka 2010, the Supreme Court held that narco analysis and similar tests cannot be conducted without the consent of the accused. The court clarified that statements made during such tests do not amount to confessions, as the person under the influence of the drug cannot exercise free will, right, while responding. However, it also ruled that any information or material subsequently discovered on the basis of a voluntarily administered, means after the consent has been given, voluntarily administered narco analysis test is admissible as evidence under section 27 of the Indian Evidence Act. All right, let's move on to the next question. Consider the following statements regarding the Punch mission. 1. It is the first space mission specifically designed to use the polarization of light to study the solar corona and solar wind in 3 dimensions. 2. It consists of 4 small satellites placed in a sun-synchronous low Earth orbit. Which of the statements given above is or are correct? A. 1 only, B. 2 only, C. both 1 and 2, or D. neither 1 nor 2. Please attempt this question. All right, so here we are talking of the Punch mission. Punch mission is actually a mission of NASA that is supposed to study the sun and its surrounding atmosphere. It studies the corona. It is supposed to study the corona, use polarization of light to study corona and the atmosphere of the earth, solar winds, everything of that sort. Now, if we talk of the dynamics over here, so how is it going to study? It is going to make use of 4 satellites. This mission is going to make use of 4 satellites, and these 4 satellites are going to be placed in a sun-synchronous manner, sun-synchronous orbit around the Earth. Now what happens that there is a day-night light, day-night line, also known as the terminator line. Now, since these satellites have to study the sun and the surrounding atmosphere, they should be constantly present in the sunlight, right? Only then they'll be able to study this. If they are in the dark, if they are away from the sun, they will not be able to study the sun's atmosphere. So they have to be placed in constant sunlight, and that's why they are placed in the sun synchronous orbit, which means that they are placed very near to this day or night light. So one part of this light, one part of this line is day and one part of this line is night. So they are closely spaced near this line so that they can always be in constant sunlight. Because the earth is rotating, and every time the earth is rotating, these lines are going to shift. So they cannot be constantly placed only in one sphere. They have to be placed near this line only, because this line keeps on shifting as the earth is rotating. So that's why they have to be placed near this terminator line, and by that they are always going to be present in constant sunlight, dim sunlight but constant sunlight, which is required for studying the entire atmosphere of sun. So let's look at the explanation over here. NASA's polarimeter to unify the corona or the outer atmosphere of sun, and heliosphere mission is a constellation of 4 small suitcase-sized satellites designed to study the sun and its surrounding environment. Each satellite carries a camera, and together they act as a virtual instrument, providing a continuous view of the entire inner solar system with a 90-degree field of view centered on the sun. Now, Punch is the first space mission specifically designed to use polarization of light to observe and measure the solar corona and solar wind in 3 dimensions. And the 4 Punch spacecraft will be placed in a sun-synchronous low Earth orbit positioned near the Earth's day-night terminator light. So this orbital configuration allows the satellites to remain in sunlight for most of the time and enables the constellation to maintain an unobstructed all-around view of the sun. So please take a screenshot of this. All right, moving on to the next question. Consider the following statements about gravitational lensing. Statement 1. Gravitational lensing occurs when massive celestial bodies curve space-time, causing light from distant objects to bend and produce distorted images such as rings or arcs. Statement 2. According to Einstein's general theory of relativity, gravity is the curvature of space-time and the path of light is influenced by the mass of the objects it passes near. Which of the statements is correct in respect to the above statements? A. Both statement 1 and statement 2 are correct, and statement 2 explains statement 1. B. Both statement 1 and statement 2 are correct, but statement 2 does not explain statement 1. C. Statement 1 is correct, but statement 2 is not correct, and D. Statement 1 is not correct, but statement 2 is correct. Please attempt this question. We are talking about gravitational lensing. All right. So what is gravitational lensing? What is gravitational lensing? It is actually the bending of light around very heavy celestial objects like galaxies, etc. So around very heavy celestial objects, light is going to bend. Normally, light travels through a straight line, but whenever there's going to be a very heavy celestial object, the light will bend. And when the light will bend, it will appear to us that that object is slightly stretched or curved or in a ring form or in an arc form, basically in a weird shape and not in its exact shape. This is happening because of gravitational lensing. And this actually follows Einstein's theory of relativity, because there also it is said that space-time, basically light follows whatever the space-time is following, and around heavy celestial objects, space-time will be bent. There is a bend of space-time. So light also follows this bend. Light also follows the same bend. And then we see the object in a stretched shape, in a weird shape, in a curvature kind of a shape, because light is also following the bend of space-time around heavy objects. So let's look at the statement. Gravitational lensing is a phenomenon in which the path of light from a distant celestial object is bent due to the curvature of space-time caused by massive intervening bodies such as a galaxy or a galaxy cluster. So this is explained by Einstein's general theory of relativity, which states that space and time together form a single entity called space-time, right? And according to this theory, massive objects cause space-time to curve, and gravity is not a force in the classical sense, but a manifestation of this curvature. As the light travels through space-time, it follows this curvature. So space-time is curving and light also follows the same curve. It also is going to follow the same bend. Please take a screenshot of this. Okay, moving on to the last question for today. Consider the following statements regarding GSAT-7R satellite. 1. It was the heaviest communication satellite launched from India to a geosynchronous transfer orbit. 2. It was launched aboard the LV-M3 M5 rocket. 3. It is designed and developed indigenously by the Indian Space Research Organization. Which of the statements given above is or are correct? A. 2 only, B. 2 and 3 only, C. 1 and 2 only, or D. 1, 2 and 3. Please attempt this question. All right. So here we are talking about the GSAT-7R satellite, which was also known as the CMS-03 satellite. It was a communication satellite, and yes, this was launched indigenously. This has been developed by the Indian Space Research Organization, and this was the heaviest communication satellite launched from India to a geosynchronous transfer orbit. So this was first launched to a transfer orbit, and from the transfer orbit, it will go to the low Earth orbit. From the transfer orbit, it goes to the Earth orbit, the low Earth orbit. First, it goes to the transfer orbit because it does not have enough fuel. And then once it reaches the transfer orbit, it uses the other fuel, it uses the other engines which are there, and then it makes use of that fuel to reach the geosynchronous or the low Earth orbit. And this was the heaviest communication satellite, CMS-03. It was launched aboard the LV-M3 M5 rocket. This was the mission 5 of LV-M3, and this was designed by ISRO. So here all the statements would be correct. So if we look at the explanation, ISRO has successfully launched CMS-03, India's heaviest indigenously developed advanced communication satellite from Sriharikota. It was developed by ISRO. The satellite was placed into geosynchronous transfer orbit using the launch vehicle Mark III, and the satellite weighed around 4,400 kgs. That's why it was the heaviest satellite, 4,400 kgs, and it was launched from India to GTO. After insertion to GTO, it will maneuver its final geostationary orbit using the onboard propulsion system. So statement 1 and 2 are correct, and the 3 is also correct. So that was all for today's discussion. Now we will look at a practice question for prelims. Consider the following. 1. Collision of black holes. 2. Merger of neutron stars. And 3. Core collapse of massive stars. Which of the above activities are known sources of gravitational waves? A. 1 and 2 only, B. 2 and 3 only, C. 1 and 3 only, or D. 1, 2 and 3. So please attempt this question and provide your answers in the comment section. Thank you for watching, and we will meet in a new episode.
For more informative content, like, share and subscribe, and do not forget to press the bell icon to get the notifications.